Hello everyone, and welcome to the World Esports Academic Seminar 2021. And my name is Gil Fried, and it is my pleasure to be here with you and to share a case study that I'm working on, which hopefully will give you some insight into risk management and security practices as it relates to esports events. Now, I have to give a disclaimer from the very beginning, and that disclaimer is that we are talking about the EA Madden 19 tournament in Jacksonville, Florida, and a shooting that occurred there a couple of years ago. I am intimately involved in this case because I was the expert witness for EA Sports in all the cases. But what I'm sharing with you today is public knowledge, and I'm not getting into any of the facts of the case that are more proprietary or secret or anything else like this. This is all public information, as well as my perceptions from going through the cases, which just settled a couple of weeks ago. So this is very fresh, very new, and I want to make sure I could share that with you. So welcome to Esports Event Security, a case study of the Jacksonville shooting case by Gil Fried. Before we go to the slides, let me just indicate that I am a professor and department chair at the University of West Florida. So Jacksonville is not far from me. It's about maybe 6-7 hours away by driving. But America is big, so in some countries I could go from one side of the country to another, but for us it's just from one part of the state to another part of the state. And for those that saw me present a couple of years ago in Busan, I was at the University of New Haven. I have now switched allegiances and I'm with the University of West Florida, and happy to be here in this sunny state. So let's go from there. Let's go to the first slide on here, and that's slide number 2, Jacksonville shooting cases. So there's some things that we know about this case. We know that the shooter, and I'm not going to mention his name because I don't want to give him any credibility or respect or anything else. He was a 24-year-old man from Maryland who drove down from Maryland to Jacksonville for the tournament. So he went with an intent to cause harm. There were people that traveled all over the United States to be at the event because this is one of 4 qualifiers to get to Las Vegas to compete in the major Madden tournament. And so this was one of the qualifying events. The shooter was there the first day, did not engage in any inappropriate conduct or anything else. And on the second day, after he lost a match, is when he ended up shooting a number of people. He killed 2 individuals, 2 people that were competing in the tournament. He injured 11 people, and then he shot himself. The entirety of the shooting incident lasted just a couple of seconds. It was very, very fast. The shooter drove to the tournament with 2 guns. He also had ammunition, and he was there with an intent to cause harm to other people. That represents one of the concerns when we look at liability, is what should be your responsibility when someone else engages in inappropriate conduct? Can you stop someone? I was the expert witness in the Aurora Theater shooting cases, and in all of those cases, the plaintiffs lost because the jury ended up coming back saying, yes, while the theater did a number of things wrong, this guy was intent on causing harm, and it doesn't matter what the theaters would have done, he would have done something to harm others. And that's something that we have to keep in the back of our mind. There's no 100% way to protect individuals when people are so determined to cause harm to others. There were about 117 participants in this tournament. It wasn't a huge tournament. There weren't a lot of fans. There were some fans there, and they paid, but the fans that were there were primarily associated with some of the other tournament players. This happened at a restaurant, so it wasn't a huge venue. It wasn't like a large arena or anything else like that. The shooting, as I said before, happened on the second day of the tournament with no problems at all the first day of tournament, and there was a smaller crowd on the second day because of eliminations that occurred during the first day of the tournament. There was also no warning about the attack, and that's important because one of the issues with liability is foreseeability, and here there was no foreseeability. That's the pause, and now we go to slide 3. And this is called slide 2 as it relates to Jacksonville shooting cases. We also know that EA had contracted with a third party to operate the event. This was not an EA Electronic Arts event. This was an event put on by Chicago Pizza, and they had their own club, so to speak, in the back of their restaurant, which was an e-sport competition area, an area where they were generating revenue from e-sport games being played and from tournaments being held there and things like that. It had a gaming lounge. It also had a gaming license, or I should say an alcohol license to be able to serve alcohol. So there was alcohol at the venue, a full service kitchen, and everything else was there. They had run close to 20 prior events. These events were primarily fighting-based e-sport events. They did not have any issues at all with any of these other events. The owner of Chicago Pizza, who's an esport player and was knowledgeable about esports, he was there to help run the tournament along with a colleague that was brought in to help share some of the possible revenue. All the revenue from the event would have gone to Chicago Pizza. They were the ones in the position to make the money. They were the ones that EA had contracted with, saying, you are the ones that are running this tournament. It was their tournament. It just so happened to have EA's name associated with it. Now we go to slide number 4. And this is slide number 3 in terms of the facts of the Jacksonville shooting case. Chicago Pizza was part of a mall. So this was not a freestanding restaurant. It was part of a larger establishment where they had a number of other restaurants and shops and things like that. The mall provided security, but the security was a roving security designed to protect the mall, not a specific restaurant or venue. There was mixed testimony if there was knowledge by the security company of the tournament or the mall ownership if they knew about the tournament. But there was security that had come through on Saturday, and they should have known what was going on if they had a presence there, but there was no specific request to have security there. So that's important to understand. Chicago Pizza did not notify the police about the tournament. Chicago Pizza sold alcohol at the event, but because this was in the middle of the day, it wasn't like large amounts of alcohol traditionally seen at football games. Now, they used to bring in security for major football games such as Florida versus Alabama or some of the other games that might be broadcast, but this event they did not bring in any security. Chicago Pizza also did not have any safety, security, or risk management plan in place other than what they normally have for their restaurant. And so there was nothing in writing to indicate what should have been the protocols in place. And then that is something of contention, because do you need to have a full written security plan for a small tournament like this compared to what might be seen at an event where you might have 18,000 fans in attendance? Moving on to the next slide. This is slide number 5. This is a picture of the GLHF, which stands for Good Luck, Have Fun game bar, and that was inside Chicago Pizza. This is the police tape on the outside after the shooting with a police investigator there in this photo. The next photo is or slide number 6. It's a photo of Elijah Clayton. He was one of the 2 victims. He had won a number of Madden tournaments in the past. Here's a picture of one that he had won where he was the champion of the Jaguars Madden tournament. There also was another well-known gamer who also had passed away as well. There supposedly was some hostility between Mr. Clayton and the shooter, and that might have been something which triggered the shooter to target him in particular, but who knows, because we don't know the motivation of the shooter. All right, so that brings us to slide 7, called the cases. And so the cases that were filed involved Jacob Mitich, I hope I'm pronouncing it correctly, versus Electronic Arts. They also sued Jacksonville Landing, which is the mall. They sued Chicago Pizza. They sued the owner of Chicago Pizza. They also sued the mall security. Now, EA was sued in part because they are deep pockets. And so deep pockets are always going to be named in a lawsuit in the United States. In the United States, probably one of the biggest pastimes that we see is not football or basketball or soccer, is blaming. We want to blame people. And it's quite unfortunate when that happens because sometimes people will use emotions and even though someone might not have done anything wrong, a jury could be swayed one way or another by the emotions of seeing pictures of the deceased or people who have had their lives altered by a crime or an incident or whatever it might be. So that's something that has to be in the back of the mind, and that's why so many cases in America get settled before it goes to a jury, because you never know what a jury might decide. In total, there were a number of injured parties and their heirs who sued. So if they were like the two deceased players, they could not sue because they are no longer with us, and so their families sued. But there also were people who were injured, not just the 11 who were injured, but some of the people who had post-traumatic stress disorder and other incidences of mental anguish associated with being there at the event. There were a number of defendants, and I previously mentioned them, and the basic claim was negligence. Negligence is a failure to act in a reasonably prudent manner. And you're held to a standard of what would people in the industry have done. And that's what you're trying to really do. Now, EA is one of the biggest leaders in the electronic sports area, in the esport area. So they are held to a high standard similar to other publishers such as Activision Blizzard or Take-Two or some of the other ones that are out there. So the basic claim was negligence, such as negligent event production, that they didn't put on the event correctly, or negligent contracting with an event organizer, basically claiming that EA should never have gone into a contract with Chicago Pizza because Chicago Pizza does not have the skill or ability to put on this event. At least that is what could be the claim. All right, so let's go to slide 8, which is the plaintiff's claim. Even though the contract said Chicago Pizza was responsible for running the event, and it explicitly said that in the contract, the plaintiffs claimed a couple different things. That this was a major event because this is part of a qualifying for a major tournament in Las Vegas, that this was a big show and that EA should have been more involved in it. They also claimed basically that EA provided some of the prizes. One of the prizes for the top 2 finishers were the ability to travel to the Madden Championship in Las Vegas. So they said because there were prizes, even though all the other prizes like cash prizes were given by Chicago Pizza, that this could be something where people could say, well, EA is giving prizes, so they are more heavily involved in it. I said, this is my perception of what the plaintiffs were claiming in this case. Plaintiffs also are basically looking at EA promoted the event because when you signed on to play Madden, that there would be screenshots showing here are some of the qualifying events, here's some of the tournaments that are out there. So their basic claim was that EA was going to be trying to promote this event, so it's really their event kind of thing. They also claimed that EA provided some equipment. Now, these were some of the test equipment that they had. And so they were controllers that are not traditionally sold in the store, but are designed to be able to test what's going on. And because this is considered a higher level kind of controller, they're saying, well, maybe EA was more involved because they provided these controllers, but providing the controls also provides the ability to control the game a little bit better. So is that really an issue? Also, there was one employee who attended the event from EA, and he was there to make sure that things went smoothly in terms of recording what was going on. And part of this was due to the fact that this was just launched maybe a week or two before this tournament. So this was part of the major launch, and they didn't want any glitches to go on, and they wanted accuracy in terms of scores being recorded, because there have been past instances where that wasn't the case. There also were two engineers who were part of the game development team from EA who just so happened to live not far from there, and they decided to drive up just to see how it was interacting and what was going on. So these are all part of the known facts of it, but like everything else, you could take known facts and twist them almost any way you want, and that happens in a lot of different cases. And so basically what the plaintiffs were trying to show was that there was a nexus, a connection between EA and the event. Just trying to make it seem like, hey, EA, yeah, you did some major events in the past, and in those major events, you had security. So this is an event, and this is basically, in our opinion, a major event, even though it wasn't huge, not a lot of spectators, not at a large venue, none of that kind of stuff. But it's your event, and so you should have made sure that you were responsible for security, even though there was never any indication whatsoever that there was ever going to be any problems, nor was there any past incidences similar to this which would put them on notice or anyone in our industry on notice. Slide 9. The plaintiff's argument that EA should have vetted CP more thoroughly is part of what they were trying to look at, saying, look, you should have known better, that this was a small-time operator. But there are small-time operators who put on great events. So they had the history. This is something that wasn't a fly-by-night company. They were a restaurant that had been in business for years and put on many, many major events at the venue. So they had experience. So how do you judge that? That's something you don't want to be in the hands of a jury to determine whether or not someone is appropriate or not. But the plaintiffs were claiming that EA hosted major events where security was provided in the past. But these were major events where they had top players throughout the world that might be coming in, major cash tournaments, or tournaments that were at their studios or other individual studios, or at major venues such as Madison Square Garden or wherever it might be, and that, hey, look, you should have brought it to that level. But that's not the standard. And that's what we have to be careful of, is that people from outside the industry can come in and try to say, well, this is what you should have done. But it's our industry that should be the ones dictating what goes on. And that's why we have to speak with a unified voice. And that's why International Esports Federation is so important in helping to establish and set those standards. Slide 10. The plaintiff's claim against Chicago Pizza. The plaintiffs claim that Chicago Pizza was not qualified. They did not communicate with key stakeholders like police, security, people like that. They did not implement any security plans, whether it is monitoring people, whether it's screening people at the door, whatever it was. They also claimed that the venue was too small, even though that has nothing to do with the event, because you could have crimes occur in small little spaces, like a phone booth even, kind of thing. They had too many people at the event is one of their claims, and they modified their venue in violation of building codes. Now, that is up to interpretation whether or not they did or did not control the building and if that violated the building code. But that just represents part of the strategy in lawsuits. You try throwing the kitchen sink at people to try to show, okay, you did something wrong and that you're not the best character. Slide number 11. The plaintiff's claims as it relates to the gaming industry. And this is an important consideration. While the industry was not on trial, it actually was on trial. And I've seen this before in cases involving such as the NFL and organizations like that, where what they do is they try to say, well, you have a culture of drunken people at a football game, so if someone has anything to drink, they're probably drunk and you probably overserve them and you should be the responsible party. What the plaintiffs were trying to claim here is that the esports was an environment with toxic masculinity. You know, these men who are like, I'm a macho man, I'm going to do whatever I want to do, and a lot of trash talking, all the potential for violence. some players who might have been suspended at different times from different platforms. That was one of the things that they kept trying to highlight, is the shooter here had an issue one time with an account with EA, and that should have put them on notice. But how many people don't pay, don't do this, don't do that, whatever it is, and their account could be suspended? But that's one of the things that they were trying to highlight, that, well, as an industry, we should know better, and that if someone has had past incidences with their account with a publisher, that they should not be participating in a game. Well, that's not the standard, because people have their accounts suspended for so many different reasons. And even if they're trash talking or saying inappropriate or homophobic or racial slurs or whatever it is, that doesn't mean that they're going to cause any violence, kind of thing. So is it a stretch? So they're trying to lambast our entire industry. These types of broad sweeps of generalities can be seen in other contexts, so we just have to be careful for it. So what was the results of this? The cases were settled, with the last two cases, and this is slide 12. The cases were settled, with the last two cases settling a couple days before the trial was supposed to begin. This is common in America. It's called settling at the courthouse steps. What was possibly the best result was that we now have a better understanding of these types of incidences and how we can, as an industry, protect ourselves. So what are some of the lessons learned? This is slide 13. Publishers and major events are the deep pockets that everyone goes for. We just have to be aware of them. We have to protect ourselves. And the more we can try to establish what are best practices, I don't like to call them standards because every event is different, the better it is, because we can then show, okay, you did X, Y, and Z, and that's what we want from events. We also have to take care with the contracts, even if you put certain elements into a contract. And you could have everything in the contract saying you're responsible for everything for the event. Someone could come and say, well, that's not good enough. So the best way to write your contracts is to be as clear as possible and highlight specific duties. We're asking you to do X, Y, Z. And always follow up with insurance. That could be a critical part of the contracting process, because your insurance carrier might have very specific rules that they want you to follow, which they might think is a best practice to follow. Slide 14. Security is now on the radar for even smaller events. This is something that's important for us, because security was on the radar for large events. When we're doing it at major stadiums or arenas, it is a major issue, and we've been taking care of that for years. But even small events should, there be guides put out by the publisher indicating this is a strategy to help make your event safer. Because even today, if I went on the internet, I would find that there are a number of guides to put on a tournament, and none of them say anything about security. So is this something that we should be trying to take a look at as an industry, because it's on our radar now, and now that there has been at least one incident, we have to be careful about it. The devils are always in the detail. And lawyers, expert witnesses, they'll all play Monday morning quarterback, as we call it in the United States, which means tearing a game apart afterwards and saying, well, they should have done X, they should have done Y. That's easy to say, but even if you do X, Y, Z and all the different steps that are recommended, there's still going to be the potential for harm to occur. And risk management is important, and having plans, checklists, and everything else are so important. You don't want to overkill. You don't want a 1,000-point checklist, but you want a checklist that provides enough detail that someone could go through and take a look and say, okay, we've done this, we've done this, we've done that. And that provides the proof that you need if it comes to a situation where you're going to trial, where you can show that you're acted in a responsible and reasonable manner. Slide 15, the conclusion. Sporting events have been preparing for major terrorist and minor criminal events for years. We have a lot of different strategies where it's clear bag policies, it's magnetometers, which are the metal detectors coming in, it's roving security, plainclothes personnel, whatever it is. And we have to be aware that that is what goes on in that industry, and that probably is what's going to be asked of our industry, or at least there will be expert witnesses who might come forward saying, this is how you should act. You should be similar to sporting events. So the more we can act similar to sporting events, I think the stronger argument is that we are a professional type of entity and sport and organization, and we try to follow the best practices. And also care needs to be taken to examine all risks. And it's not just the major risks that we can see, such as harmed individuals from assaults by others, terrorist attacks, things like that. The most common thing you're going to see is slip and fall, trip and fall. You know, if you have spilled liquid on a walkway, that's more likely that it's going to result in a slip and fall case than if you might have a potential terrorist or criminal kind of activity. Be vigilant. Semper vigilante. You have to constantly be vigilant, and that's what I encourage everyone to do. Be on the lookout, protect yourself. Slide 16, this is my contact information. Feel free to contact me at gfried@uwf.edu. My phone number is there as well. And I wish I was in South Korea to be with everyone, but hopefully the pandemic will be past us next year, and then maybe next year I'll be able to see everyone in South Korea. Take care, everyone. I hope you learned a lot. Thank you.